In this final part of the Notation for Beginners series, I'll talk about two final important concepts, which are tempo and bars. Let's start with tempo. Remember I told you there was a small white lie in the previous lecture when I said that this thing would be half a second, and this would be a second, and this would be a whole 2 seconds. Now these things have names. This is called a quarter. Don't ask me a quarter of what. It's a short question with a long answer. This is called a half. This is called a whole. Simply put, the quarter is a quarter of the whole. So why is this called the whole? That's another story. And this thing is called an eighth note. Eighth note. This is called a 16th note, and so forth. Now, the white lie is that this thing is not necessarily half a second. The only important thing is that whatever the quarter is, the half is going to be twice as long. The whole is going to be 4 times as long. The eighth is going to be half as long as the quarter. It's kind of confusing, I know. The 16th is going to be a quarter as long as the quarter. Once again, it's a bad nomenclature, not mine. And the only question is, how do you really tell the player, that is, how long a quarter should be? And the answer is by specifying the tempo of the song. And this is done by giving a number, which is the BPM of the song. Now, BPM stands for beats per minute, and a beat, for our purposes, is just a quarter. So, for example, if I told you that the BPM of this song was 120, I mean that you'd be able to stuff 120 quarters in a minute. Now, we can do a little math. So we have 120 quarters a minute, and since a minute has 60 seconds, that means 2 quarters in a second. And this means that each quarter would be exactly half a second, right? If you have 2 a second, each has to be a half. So what we've been doing so far is we've been playing Mary Had a Little Lamb at this tempo, a tempo of 120 BPM. And to signify this, people sometimes just note at the top that a quarter equals 120, which means that the BPM of this song is 120. Now, let's talk about the general case. Obviously, nobody's going to do this math, and even if they were, how would they actually keep time? And to do this, we have something called a metronome. Let me show you how a metronome works, and through that you'll, I hope, come to understand the concept of BPM a little clearer. Okay, what I have here is a simple metronome that's manufactured by, in this case, Korg, but really any metronome would do. And what you do with this simple metronome is, well, let me mute it for a second. When you turn it on, you're going to be setting the tempo, which is the BPM. You see here it says 100. So this means that I've set the BPM of this metronome to be 100. So I'm going to unmute it now, and you can hear this highly annoying click. I'm going to mute it again, and this click tells you how long each quarter should be. So I'll unmute it and play the tempo specified by this. So it's really very simple. you look for the BPM specification at the top of the song, you set your metronome, and you play along with the metronome, where each click tells you how long a quarter should be. Right? If you see a half a note, which is 2/4 long, you'll simply wait for 2 clicks. If you see a whole note, you'll wait for 4 clicks. Let's take another just simple example. Suppose my song said my tempo is 120. So I'm going to set my tempo accordingly. So I'm going to bring this down to 120. Here you can see. I'm going to unmute it, and I'm going to play Mary Had a Little Lamb at this tempo. So this is how it works. Pretty straightforward. You can buy these for 10, 20 bucks. Any generic metronome would do. There's nothing magical about this one. And that's the way it's done. The last concept I'd like to talk about is time signatures and bars. So you might see something at the beginning of your score notation that looks like this, say 4/4 or 3/4, and this means that whoever wrote this score decided to group the notes into groups, each of which has 4/4 or something of equivalent length. So let me just divide it, we'll divide it together and you'll see how this works. As you see here, we have 4/4, so this will be what's known as a bar. And after each bar, we're going to put a vertical line. The next 3 notes are 2/4 and a half. And remember, a half is twice as long as a quarter. So we actually have something that's 4/4 long, right? 1 plus 1 plus 2, which is 4, right? Because the half is 2/4. So this would be another bar. Here we have another bar. We put a vertical line, another bar. Remember, a bar is 4/4 long. You can have anything as long as it's 4/4 long. Here's another bar, these 4/4. Another one more, and the last group of notes is just 4/4 long, right? It's a whole note. Remember, a whole note is 4/4 long, so it's a bar in itself. So each of these groups is a bar. And this division was decided upon because we have this time signature at the start, and this time signature 4/4 simply tells you that each bar will have 4/4. This is what this means. If someone would have written 3/4, this would mean that each bar would have 3/4. You can have weird time signatures like 7/8, and this would mean that each bar would have or would be exactly 7/8 notes long. So this is a weird time signature. It's for more advanced music, probably one which you won't run into as a beginner. As a beginner, almost all of the pieces you'll be playing could be grouped into these two. We won't go exactly into how one chooses a time signature, mainly because you'll be reading notation more than you'll be writing notation. Writing is a more advanced activity. So as a reader, all you care about is understanding these symbols, and these symbols have this simple explanation. How many quarters long, how many quarters you have each bar. And the reason there are bars is it's mainly a visual aid. I could have taken the bars away and the piece of music would still have the same meaning. It would still have the same notes with the pitches and the durations. But it helps out when you're reading a long piece to have these subdivisions into small segments, small units, bars. So you can say, I'm going to play bars 1 until 4 today, and maybe I'll practice bars 5 until 9 tomorrow. Or when you're playing in a group or in an orchestra, it makes sense to say, let's start from bar 400 instead of counting 1600 quarter notes to get to wherever it is your conductor tells you to start from. So that's why bars were mainly created. It's sort of like a bookmark. So this wraps things up. This is the end of our lesson. I hope you've learned something, and stay tuned for more. See you next time.